Welcome, everybody. I'm Liz Miller, and I'm here with Pastor Jeff, and we're just kind of wrapping up a series called
Finding Your Way Back to God.
Finding Your Way Back to God. And this one you titled Awakening to Life.
Yeah.
And I loved that. I love the idea of just really embracing the life that we have here fully and living in the Lord that way. And so you brought up a couple points that I had a couple questions about. You talked about how God washes us.
Yep.
And he sanctifies us and he justifies us. And so washes us and makes us clean. And then you mentioned he sanctifies us and we surrender ourselves to him and allow him to use our lives for his purpose and for his glory. And I was just kind of wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, because maybe if I'm a newer Christian, I could hear that and get a little concerned, like I have all these plans and these dreams that I want in my life. And God, what are you asking me to lay that down?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, as I was getting ready for this weekend, this conversation was very hard for me to develop because it could go a bunch of different ways. Mm-hmm. And one of the iterations that I took it down was a whole conversation about identity, that because I am a child of God, I live this way.
Yeah.
I don't live this way to become a child of God, right? So that sanctification, that I'm set apart for God's use and God's glory, is tied to that. So if you hear that incorrectly, you would think, I give my life to God, and then I guess I just become like a tool.
Right?
He just does whatever he wants to do. And that's the wrong mindset with it. So it would be this way. When I gave my life to Heidi, my wife, I became hers. I'm set apart. I'm set apart for her use and for her well-being.
Yeah.
You and I are both parents. We could say that kind of about our kids.
Absolutely.
Our lives are set apart for them. So we're going to make decisions for our children before we would ever consider making them for ourselves. And it's not a legal contract, it's love. Right? So it's out of love that I want to be used. We might say, I live my life for my children.
Yeah.
I live my life for my family.
Yeah.
Right? So that's more the idea with it. And I actually was going to do this whole thing, and
I touched on
this.
You
nailed this thing. I was actually going to go through this weekend Ephesians chapter 4 and chapter 5, and I'll just show a piece of it. Like chapter 4, verse 20 or 17. Paul says, I tell you this, insist on it in the Lord, that you no longer live as the Gentiles do, the godless people do, in the futility of their thinking. They are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of their ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their heart. Having lost all sensitivity, they've given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity and all kinds of greed. They've wandered away, and they're engaging in wild living. Okay, so here's what he says in verse 20. This is the important part. That, however, is not the way of life you learned, right? When you heard about Christ and were taught in accordance with the truth that is in Jesus, you were taught, with regard to your former way of life, to put off the old self, which is being corrupted by deceitful desires, and to be made new in the attitudes of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. And then what happens is Paul goes through the rest of Ephesians chapter 4 and Ephesians chapter 5. You can read it for yourselves. And what you'll see is he says that, and then he explains what to do. Therefore, put off all falsehood, blah, blah, blah. Later on, he says, live as children of the light. Children of the light do these things, right?
Oh,
and it's not this list of stop it to sanctify yourself.
Right.
It is very much the mindset of because you are sanctified, you live in this identity, right? So because I am married, I live this way. Because I have children, I live this way. It's not to earn children. It's because I love my kids. I often talk about it with people as a spiritual dignity.
Oh, that's what I felt tonight when you were teaching. I felt my shoulders even kind of go back because you touched on like we are a son or a daughter of the King, and there's such regal, like there's power in that, and to walk strong and proud.
Yeah, you're absolutely. That's exciting for me that's the way you felt, because that's it right there. And it's not an arrogance because of this imputation, right? God does it all for us. We talked about that in the message tonight. But it is like, this is who I am, and this is my new identity, and I'm going to live from this, and I get to represent God. That's His purpose. I get to. Jesus says, serve as my ambassadors, as if I myself am making my appeal through you. Yeah. I get to speak on behalf of God. That's his use and His glory. Now, we would take that and say, right, through all the trials of life, through the suffering and all the joy and all the successes of life, that all goes back to Christ because of what He did for me. Yeah. But it is that right there. Like, I am sanctified. Like, God did this for me. I'm not perfect, and I didn't bring it on myself, or I'd be boasting about it. Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't mean that pride in any sort of like a poor man, just in like walking strong in the Lord. There's such beauty in that, and the fact that He did. I like that you taught us a new doctrine today. Yeah. You talked about the doctrine of impunity and imputation. Imputation. Oh, I know. Imputation. So in God's righteousness, He covers me. When God sees me, He sees His righteousness, not my sins, and that's just it's beautiful. And I think in that I can walk tall and proud. So that's awesome. I love it. You got it, girl. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us. This has been a Weekend Extra with Liz and Jeff.